Hello. Yeah, so slides, please. So yeah, I work for a US government lab outside Washington, D.C., called NIST. We are non-policy, non-regulatory, non-operational. So what do? We do measurement in physics, chemistry, IT, civil engineering, all sorts of things. Underneath IT, we do biometrics, and alongside biometrics, we have been looking at age estimation. Um, so we have a set of benchmarks, and for many years we've done face recognition and fingerprint and iris and voice and DNA and stuff like this. But that was to do with who is in an image. So you get an algorithm, you pass it some images, and you're trying to do identity of the person. Okay, so we have, we have a set of benchmarks. The top set in blue are to do with identity, who is in an image. The following set, and we made this split between our benchmarks about a year ago because the privacy implications of analyzing a face are different than recognizing who is in a face. All right, so the very last entry on this slide is what I'm going to be talking about today. Algorithms that look at a face and give you an estimate of the age. And that turns out to be an enabling technology for this whole paradigm of age assurance. I'm not talking about hand geometry, I'm not talking about voice, I'm just talking about algorithms that do age estimation on single images. So we wrote an API, we published it, we put it out for comment, and in that API, C++, three functions. The first one takes a look at an image and produces a continuous valued number. So in that case, 36.4. We also have a function that takes a threshold value, say 25, and an image, and it just says, is this person 25 or over? And that turns out to be true. The third function, recognizing or hypothesizing that some people look young for their age, like me, right? If you knew a prior sample from, say, a trusted ID, then you could maybe account for that and adjust your estimate on the basis of that. I don't know if that's particularly operationally relevant, but we put it in the API. The reason we put number 2 in the API, because you can implement age verification here by doing age estimation and then putting in the threshold. The reason we put in number 2 is because you can at least conceive of making a neural network or some other ML or pattern recognition system that explicitly tailored to determining is somebody over the age of 25 or not, rather than doing the regression problem, which is number 1, which is mapping pixels to continuous valued age. All right, so we did this and we started last fall, and there's a report which is on my management's desk at the moment, and it's took a bit longer than we anticipated, but it will be public April, May, hopefully April. All right, and it documents various things in red on the right. Accuracy gains since we did this in 2014. So we did an exact repeat of what we did in 2014. We also did a number of other things, including measuring accuracy in different ways. So we looked at demographics and we looked at quality eyeglasses, and we'll continue to do this. This is an open-ended activity. New algorithms will come in and we will continue. All right, so we use data sets, and we use data sets numbering in the millions, and of 4 kinds, right? So visa images, mugshot images, application images collected in an immigration office in the United States, and border images taken in airports, people walking through immigration lanes and having their picture taken. We also looked at a data set of exactly 1 person, which I'll show you in just a second. These numbers may apparently be quite big, but once you slice and dice for the number of female 17-year-olds from South Asia, then these numbers can get smaller, right? And so if you divide intersectionally on these things, then you can get smaller data. I put a red box around the application photos because they are they're collected with a dedicated camera rig in an office setting, attended operation, high quality photos, glasses off, person looking at the camera. So it's sort of as good as it gets. And you can see some toy examples there. They're not the real images. I'm not allowed to show you the real images, but they're representative images. All right, so that's the data sets. And I mentioned demographics. So we wanted to look at demographics, and it's pretty common now in AI. Whenever you expose an algorithm to some human data where skin is visible, fingerprints, faces, iris recognition even, it's common to be concerned with skin tone. Now, why do you go there? Why do you think about that? And the reason is physics. It is that dark toned skin reflects less light. So you have less photons hitting a sensor, and that can give you dynamic range problems, low contrast, noise, and general loss of information. People have reacted to that and said, okay, we need to measure skin tone. And one way to do that, and it's a heuristic and not very good, is to do the Fitzpatrick skin tone. And that originally was invented for dermatological use, and it was to be done by a dermatologist in an office having access to your skin. It is now being done by people looking at AI by inspecting an image displayed on a say, a laptop or on a monitor. And that, of course, is subject to variation to do with the illuminant, the sensor settings that capture the image, the display settings. And I'm going to show you on the next slide why this is problematic. So here's the next slide, and we'll go back. Two people collected with 12 different cameras contemporaneously within minutes of each other. And you can see that skin tone here is not faithfully represented, shall we say, because of those various things. And these are commercial cameras mounted to biometric recognition systems. And you can measure certain things from this, but there's a lack of consistency here. And that's published. There's a URL at the bottom there in the academic literature. So we have this inconsistency thing. So our approach to demographics is to say that skin tone measurement is necessary because of the low reflectance problem, but it's really not sufficient because skin tone is but one phenotype in a face. So our face is driven by nature and nurture. Genetics play a big role, and they govern things like prominence of cheekbones, thickness of lips, thickness of eyebrows, width of face, high cheekbones, square jawlines, affecting both hard tissue and soft tissue. And you could suspect, you could hypothesize that any algorithm that looks at a face might be sensitive to those things. And this is true in face recognition. And so it may be true in age estimation. So we took, to address this, we considered people of various national origins. So these are people who are recorded in databases of immigration-related photos as being born in these countries. And these countries are selected to have little recent long-distance immigration. So if it says you're born in Vietnam, then it's an indication of ethnicity, some indication of ethnicity. Now we can group those into regions, and we put them in 6 regions. And maybe Myanmar should be in South Asia rather than, it is in South Asia, but maybe it should be in Southeast Asia, but we put them in these regions. And that is what you might call a slightly lower resolution view of ethnicity. And we do that to increase the number of samples in each bin. All right. Now you can, of course, go the other way, and you would really ideally like detailed ethnicity within Nigeria and Vietnam, and this has all been studied and documented, but that doesn't exist in databases, not in any volume. So we don't have that. And of course, you wouldn't want to do, say, somebody is from Africa, then you're obviously throwing away information. So we use the regions in the middle of this slide, 6 regions, and we document accuracy for face recognition today and face age estimation for different countries and different regions. Okay, so here we go, some results. And this is the 6 developers participated in the first phase of this. And it's open today, so you could send us an algorithm today and we would start running it. And we recorded memory usage, how long it takes, below a quarter second generally. Some of the algorithms produce a continuous valued age estimate, and some of the algorithms give you an integer estimate. So 24.3 or 24. All right, and then we ran it on an exact database that we used a decade ago. And the 2 algorithms in red were the leading algorithms at that time from face recognition companies. But 5 algorithms now beat that pretty much on the 4 different metrics shown there, mean absolute error, and some of the others that were sort of less interesting or notable. 1 algorithm is actually inferior to Cognitech 2014. Maybe that's unexpected. So mean absolute error is a sort of a generic statistic. It's not really related to a particular application. So I'm going to talk about other metrics coming up. In particular, we have this thing about challenge 25. So we're in the UK. Alcohol sales, for example, are limited to people under the age of 18. And you're concerned with how many people are classified to have age above 25. So if you're 17, we have a false positive rate. And I don't know if that's the language that's being used in the standard exactly right now. We have a false positive rate for 17-year-olds classified as over 25. 16-year-olds as well. And then we have a table at the bottom, 6 different algorithms. And for each age, it says how often are those people classified as over 25. And we get some numbers. And so 17 would be the most difficult age group because they're right just below 18. And 14-year-olds are obviously easier. So any given, if you were to just grab a data set from the internet, it's got some 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds, 16, 17-year-olds. It's got a mixture of people in it. Any imbalance there will affect the overall false positive rate measurement. So kind of what you want to do is make individual measurements by age, 14, 15, 16, and then you want to weight them. And you want to weight them in 2 ways. One is sort of demographically, how many 14-year-olds are there in a particular country? You might also want to weight them by how likely are they to even attempt to go and buy alcohol. This is one model that you might use to aggregate raw measurements of false positive rate. I'm not saying it's a definitive model. It's not the right model in certain circumstances. And the weights would have to come from, say, a population pyramid, but also probably come from something like sociological studies. We don't particularly use that model, but I advance it just to note that false positive rates are important. And they vary, they're different for 14-year-olds than they are for 17-year-olds. So your data set composition matters, and you need to account for that in how you aggregate statistics at the end. All right, so is challenge 25 the right number? Of course, you could do challenge 24. We would aspire to do challenge 22 or challenge 23 for 18-year-old age restriction level. In the United States, it's age alcohol prohibition at age 21. So maybe we should be doing challenge 28. But maybe we could get away with something lower than that. This kind of graphic appears in the report, and it just shows for 6 different algorithms, what is that false positive rate when you increase the challenge age. So challenge 25 is the red line. Could we go lower? Maybe. It depends on the algorithm that you're using. But yeah, and so that is aggregated over a whole data set. But we really need some visibility into what's going on. And so I mentioned demographics, country of birth, and there's going to be 6 columns in this. Only 1 column is shown at the moment, and that is people born in Eastern Europe. So Poland, Russia, Ukraine, and maybe that's it. And we see false positive rates with confidence intervals down near 0, which is kind of what you want. And those error bars are computed over the sample size. It depends on the sample size that we've got. And you get down close to 0. Well, that's good. But if we look at males born in East Africa or East Asia, then the numbers tend to get a bit higher, right? And if you're going to field one of these systems in East Africa, then maybe you'd want to have a different challenge policy. If you're going to deploy this system in Paris, where you've got a very mixed society, then you'd probably need to be concerned with all of these values. Then we put it in women, the other three columns, and the numbers go a bit higher still. And this is true for 5 of 6 algorithms, that women give you higher false positive rates than do men. So to summarize inequity across each row here, over those 6 columns, we can compute a Gini coefficient. Gini coefficient was invented in economics to summarize wealth or income disparity a whole century ago. The policymakers know what that number means oftentimes. I'm not convinced it's the right number to use here, but it is mentioned in the Biometric Performance Testing Standard 19795 Part 10 as being a good way to summarize inequities in error rates across biometric systems. So Gini is one way to go. I'm not committed to it long term, but we could have other numbers. I just saw a paper from OECD, which has some interesting ways of summarizing demographic effects. There's the whole table. Now we've got 6 different regions, 2 sexes, 12 columns, plus the Gini coefficient at the end for one algorithm. And the age of the person is given in the row. So 17-year-olds would be an interesting row. It goes from 14 to 34 in this case. The numbers at the bottom are very high numbers. Everybody who's 34 generally gets classified as being over the age of 25. This is the same kind of approach to weighting again, but now we've got triple subscript. So we've got the age of the person, 14, 15, 16. We've got the region that they were born in, and we've got their sex. And you could try and build a model like this using data. And this would sort of implicitly state that, say, East Asians are less likely to buy alcohol, even though they've got a higher false positive rate, say. And so you could aggregate statistics this way, aggregate empirical measurements this way. You can do the same for false negatives, and this is about inconvenience. So somebody is over the age of 18, but they're getting classified below 25. How do you account for that? And there's the trade-off. If you do challenge 25, it's different than challenge 24. So, yeah, I'll skip that one. And then just to note that image quality matters. So we used this office collection, the application photos. We also looked at border photos. And so the last 2 rows on this slide are 17-year-old, I think males, 17-year-old males that are classified over the age of 25 by region of birth. And image quality matters. And so there was a discussion this morning in a conference room about, does viewpoint angle relative to the camera matter? And we didn't actually see any data there, but it was how you would represent results for doing that. We haven't measured that yet. We probably could. But what we see in border photos, which are of distinctly lower quality, is with less pose constraint and some cropping and some facial expression and some slightly lower contrast, then you see the algorithms are not responding to that favorably. So quality is important. You want to maintain quality. Now, this is an artist out of New York City who took his own photo every day for 25 years, and he continues to do this. This has been written up in lots of newspapers, and there's a website at the bottom left-hand corner, everyday.photo. We bought the photos from the artist, and over certain 6-month ranges, and you can see his true age on the horizontal axis here. And we gave it to 6 different age estimation algorithms, and we said, how old is he? And there's 2 things to note. One is all the red dots, the estimates, are above the blue line, which is his true age. And why would that be? He told the New York Times that he was born, I think, 1980 on July the 4th. Now, maybe he was lying. So that would explain this secular shift of everything tends to be above the blue line. But maybe he was telling the truth and he's just old for his age. I don't know. But the other thing to note about this slide is that there's noise. And he used a remark, if you go and look at the images, and you can go online and do this, you could even download the images and push them through your algorithm today. But if you go and look at the images, he used a remarkably consistent method of presentation, which is a two-arm selfie with cameras that only changed on 2 occasions, 3 different cameras, and most of the data is collected over remarkable periods of time with the same camera. What changes, facial hair, the background, the illumination. And so you get this noise. Now, I would contend that noise is not really welcome here. You don't want somebody who's aged one day to have an age estimate that's gone up by 2 years one day and down 2 years the next day. Why this occurs, I don't know. The face recognition community over a 20-year period, but particularly over the last decade, exploited neural networks to be invariant to nuisance variables like pose, illumination, expression, distortion. So to zero in on identity, and now face recognition algorithms are largely immune to lots and lots of spurious variations that have nothing to do with identity. Now, maybe that's a harder problem in age estimation than it is in biometric recognition, but maybe not, I don't know. But the noise is probably a performance indicator. And so one of the variables that's listed in the 27566 standard is standard deviation. And standard deviation is just the spread around the estimated mean. So the estimated mean can be wrong. The standard deviation tells you what the noise is around that mean. It's not particularly a good metric, but it does quantify noise. So yeah, that's the Noah Kalina story. So just a summary, mean absolute error, we tabulate this extensively in the report. It's a generic performance indicator. Error distributions are sort of interesting to see what's in the tails. In the right tail, where images are overestimated, and also in the left tail, where things are underestimated. And of course, that error distribution tends to migrate to the right and get wider to the right. 80-year-olds have got a bigger error distribution than do babies. In fact, we ran on a data set of babies, and people between 0 to 1 have got at best a mean age estimation error of about 3 months or 4 months, which sort of comports with our sort of human view of looking at babies. Challenge T is more interesting. We put a lot of effort into documenting that in the report, and T is 25 is one number that we focus on. Accuracy varies across algorithms, not surprising. Operationally, presentation attacks. So the whole field of age assurance is going to depend on a whole lot more than just age, this core age estimation technology. We've looked at presentation attack detection in the past using algorithms dedicated to that. We didn't look at it in this context. It's out of scope for us at the moment. So the next steps are to keep going and to anticipate that accuracy today will be less than accuracy tomorrow, that things will improve. And so what we intend for the report to do, and future reports, future revisions of the reports, is to put quantitative feedback in the hands of developers so that they can improve on, particularly on demographics, but in other areas also. And so development continues. I would say that noise suppression would be a valuable thing to look at, maybe via data set augmentation, which is something that the recognition community has looked at. And then bias correction. AI, the topic of bias always comes up in AI. So our program, face analysis, technology evaluation, age estimation and verification, is an ongoing resource. It's open to new developers, open to returning developers with new prototypes. We will continue to focus on what we call age estimation, image in, continuous value out. But we will also evaluate that second class of function, which is the person over 25 or not? And also what I call differential AE, prior sample, how old is this person in this new image? So that's that. And I guess after this session, we've got in another room, there's a discussion that we can have on any aspect or future directions that you all would like to see in this, any questions as well. So, yep, thank you very much. Yeah.
So hopefully perhaps have a couple of quick questions in this room before you adjourn. So from quickly looking at what was on the screen, is it fair to say that essentially on the Challenge 25, everything you've tested was at least 99.7% accurate?
On white men, yeah.
On white men, okay.
And that, yeah, I don't want to write headlines for the press, but there does seem to be demographic variations here. And I don't think skin tone measurement is, even if it's accurate, Fitzpatrick is adequate to get at variation. So we used place of birth, and you can claim it's a proxy for ethnicity. But even if it's not a proxy for ethnicity, it's valuable to certain communities. While if you're born somewhere, which is a verifiable fact, face recognition, face age estimation doesn't work as well for you.
So obviously in a diverse country like the USA, which is your sort of primary focus, what would be a sensible line for a regulator to draw if they were trying to align it with what the technology is capable of delivering?
So I'm not a policymaker, and we try to run our studies in a very application generic way. So we've got DHS applications where they've got undocumented people of all sorts of ages. They want to know how old the person is. They've got a particular focus at age 70 because they don't do biometrics on people over the age of 70. But the policy people are going to do what they're going to do. Challenge 25 might not be the right number in the US. It might be challenge 28, the 7-year buffer for alcohol sales. There are certainly many, many different applications. One thing we didn't look at is this 13 to 16-year-old for online safety. We can go and do that. But again, the policy implications there are probably different. So the harm at buying alcohol is probably different than the harm at looking, what did we hear about earlier, hardcore porn in Germany, right? So yeah, tolerance for risk or tolerance for false positives is going to vary by application and by jurisdiction, I'm sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Patrick, for that thorough analysis on facial age estimation. I just was wondering if you could comment on the, so for example, when you don't have a response from the model, because there's a face which hasn't been found, how was that accounted for in the benchmark?
So we measured it. So we make a function call, we pass in an image, and we count the number of times that the algorithm gives a non-zero return code. So the algorithm elects not to process the image. They were never above 0.3%, so 0.3%. So low values, and essentially we just took those images out of the calculation. And if the numbers had been 5%, 10%, then that would require some more sort of delicate treatment. But we basically skirted the issue.
Thank you.
Patrick, thank you so much. Thank you for coming today and sharing that information. It's the first time this information has been shared, so thank you so much for sharing it at the conference here with us today. Really appreciate that. I'm sure the audience will